There's just such a limited amount of talent in Japan. And if you want an A-level player, there's very few of them, and they're not looking for a job. So the best candidates aren't looking. They're in their company, they're having success, their company loves them, they treat them good, and they're not even thinking about leaving. So how do you find those people and convince them to leave? So if you're working with a recruiter or an in-house recruiter and you're pinging LinkedIn or getting resumes, the resumes that are floating around the market, those are the people that you probably don't want, because those are the people that are actively looking for a job, and they're not the A-level guys that are having the success.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Asia AIM, the podcast that shines a light on the people, ideas, and innovation shaping business, marketing, and communications in Japan and across the APAC region. I'm your host, Robert Held. If you've ever tried to build a sales team in Japan, you'll know it plays by a very different set of rules. The best candidates usually aren't looking, bilingual talent is limited, and in a lot of cases, you're coming up against sales approaches that haven't really evolved in years. Add to that challenge, if your brand isn't already well known in the market, even getting in the door can be very difficult. My guest today has been navigating all of this for over 30 years. Darren McKellin moved from Chicago to Japan 3 decades ago and has been building and leading sales teams here ever since. For companies like Vodafone Japan, Verizon, Oracle NetSuite, Zscaler, and most recently as country manager at Illumio. Along the way, he's interviewed more than 1,000 people, written a book on mindful sales leadership, and now has a new book coming out in Japanese called Kaishike de Katsu, which is focused on helping Japanese professionals succeed inside foreign companies. He's also just stepped into a new chapter as an advisor at Ingenium Group, working with companies across APAC to find the right kind of bilingual executive talent that so many struggle to hire. So he's seen this from both sides, building teams and now helping others do the same. His strongest attribute is hiring A players. I'm really excited to have this conversation with Darren. I want to unpack what it really means in Japan, what works, what doesn't work, and where so many companies go wrong when they try to build a sales team here. Darren, pleasure to have you. Welcome to the show.
Robert, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to be here today.
Darren, I'm going to jump straight into it. You've been in Japan 30 years now, interviewed thousands of people. What do most global companies get wrong when they land here? When someone flies in from the US or European HQ and says, we'll just run our standard sales hiring playbook in Japan, what actually happens?
Sure. So I think the first thing that they need to realize is Japan is truly a different market. And what motivates Japanese workers is very different from U.S. markets or the Western companies. So, for example, I've seen a lot of people from HQ come out here and focus on money. If you sell, you can make money, 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 money. And a lot of times, believe it or not, that's not the first thing that motivates Japanese salespeople. For example, more than making a commission, if someone closes a deal that helps the company and the country manager or the president of the company brings them on stage and says, look, Tanaka-san closed this big deal and he helped our company, and the whole company claps and he gets that recognition, that's more valuable to the worker than any amount of money. So the other one related to that is IPO. And IPO to Japanese workers is a very vague concept. They don't actually ever think they're going to get the money. Japanese taxes aren't as favorable, so it's again, it's not as effective. So focusing on money, IPO, again, as you mentioned, brand or company recognition, brand recognition of the company is very different. Maybe a company is very hot in Silicon Valley, and people in America want to work there. In Japan, they're a small company that's seen as risky. And maybe the worker's parents or wife are, we don't want you to join this small, risky company we never heard of. So that's really some of the things. What I like to focus on is, selling the dream of the technology. Like, look, we're a small company, but if you learn this technology in cybersecurity, this is a forward-looking technology where it's going to really help your career. In 2 or 3 years, you're going to be in high demand. So sell what they can learn. And another thing is, Japanese workers, and Japanese people, they want to help society. So instead of saying, hey, I work at a cybersecurity company, we sell cybersecurity, you say, you know what, if you join our company, you're going to help Japanese companies be successful globally. We're going to help protect them from cyber attacks, and that's going to allow them to be successful and help Japan and Japanese society. So it's a good thing to join our company and get our technology into Japanese companies because it's going to help them be more successful.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's more about, what's aspirational for the individual rather than just financial gains that, most, Western sales people think and companies think as well. And you've talked about 4 big friction points in Japan: limited bilingual talent, most people are not actively looking, legacy sales cultures, and you also just mentioned no brand recognition. If you had to pick one that really trips up companies, which is it and why would that be?
I'd have to say that there's just such a limited amount of talent in Japan. And if you want an A-level player, there's very few of them, and they're not looking for a job. So the best candidates aren't looking. They're in their company, they're having success, their company loves them, they treat them good, and they're not even thinking about leaving. So how do you find those people and convince them to leave? So if you're working with a recruiter or an in-house recruiter and you're pinging LinkedIn or getting resumes, the resumes that are floating around the market, those are the people that you probably don't want because those are the people that are actively looking for a job and they're not the A-level guys that are having the success. And a lot of times you look at those resumes and you can see, oh, this guy was at a company for 13 months and then 9 months and then 18 months. And you can see a lot of job hopping going on. So A-level guys, they're golden. They're really hard to find. And I would say that's really the toughest thing.
Yeah. So talking about A-level players, so A-level players require an A-level player environment, right? So, and you talk a lot about building an environment that attracts A players, not just performance, but energy, positivity, even fun, while still trying to be merit-driven, right? It sounds all great in theory, but when it comes down to reality, what does it actually look like on a normal Monday morning at the office or a Tuesday morning at the office that you are running?
Right. So again, like you mentioned, fun. So I often talk about, work should be fun. And I think workers who enjoy their job and have fun have a lot more success than workers who like, oh, it's Monday morning, I hate going in. So how do we do that? How can we do that? Well, one is with a sales team, especially, I don't like when there's too much unhealthy competition among salespeople in the office. So healthy competition's fine. You have who's going to close the first deal of the quarter, those sort of things. But it's really great if the salespeople support each other and help each other. So usually Monday is like maybe like a general meeting, but maybe Tuesday morning we have our weekly sales meeting. What I like to do is get everyone together and have the salespeople support each other. So what are you seeing in the market? What are you hearing about our competitors? And have them share information. Or here's, for example, Tanaka-san, and he's stuck. He's gotten this far in this sales process and the customer went silent. Has anyone had that experience? How can we get past that? Another thing I like to do is put the target outside the company. So most foreign companies, especially in IT or AI, they open an Australian office first because the barrier is really low there. You can just speak English and send people over. The culture is not that different from most Western cultures. So usually the Australian market's bigger than the Japan market. So I like to target that. Say, look, Australia is twice as big as us. Within 3 quarters, we're going to pass them. Why? Well, the Japan market's 4 times bigger. We have a great team. We are getting great partners, so make it a team target, and Japanese people love to be part of a team. So focus on something outside or focus on someone, a competitor inside. Like, look, everyone sees us as number 2 to ABC company in Japan. we're going to pass them. We're going to get more customers than them. So I like to make the target outside. And then, a daily fun thing. One thing, when people come in, I like to buy them a bento lunch or take them out to lunch. I mean, it's crazy. We're paying these guys 20 million yen, 25 million yen, and you buy them an 800 yen bento, and they're so happy to get something for free. But it goes a long way, and so. And then, it encourages them to come into the office in this current era we're in, where people, they want to work from home. But it's like, oh, every Tuesday we come in and there's already coffee waiting for us. Someone went to Starbucks. And then, Darren or someone's going to go out and buy a bunch of bentos, or we're going to go out to eat. And then also at night, encourage people to go out and approve their expenses. I would say if you go out to eat on your own, you can't expense it. But if you're with another member of the company and you guys go out and you're not spending a ton of money, you can expense it. And that encourages people to go out with their teammates. And of course, they're going to talk about business, and it makes it more fun. One guy we had, we would go out to eat. He had a baby and his wife was home. And I'd say, oh, we're having sushi. Let's order extra, a box of sushi for your wife. And she became such a huge fan of the company because she didn't have to cook dinner. She didn't mind that he was out meeting with us or meeting with a partner. And then that's when you really get that stickiness where employees don't want to leave. So, and then just setting a positive example. So I'm a very positive guy. And so when we have a problem, for example, if we have an angry customer and we're going to go meet them, and one of our employees says, oh, what a terrible day. We're going to have to go meet this customer. They're so angry. I'm not looking forward to it. This is a great day. Why? Well, we have an angry customer, and usually when you talk to people, you increase the communication. We're going to go out there. We're going to talk to this angry customer. We're going to fix their problem. We're going to have a path. They're going to get happy. At the end of this day, we're not going to have an angry customer. Today's a great day. And they're like, oh, I was thinking today's going to be hard. And so kind of instill that positive attitude too is kind of another way. So there you go.
Fantastic, Darren. Yeah, you've really built truly good sales teams that follow you wherever you've gone, right? And I think you bring that positive energy and you build that team cohesiveness, and it's all about team. And I like your comment about taking the competition away rather than internal, it's external competition, right?
Yeah.
So in Japan, traditionally, seniority first, harmony first, performance, what you're describing is performance driven. That doesn't work here. And it runs counterpoint. There's no cutthroat political kind of culture in Japan, right? Any comments on how you play that out? Sometimes because, your Western HQ is probably driving hard to drive sales, right? Like, how do you tone it down with your team and protect them from that?
Yeah, one comment first is the hardest thing is just setting expectations for people at headquarters, because sometimes, and I hate to say it this way, but sometimes things take a little longer. Just some Japanese companies are very conservative, and maybe you can get a contract, but they're not going to buy a license for every server on the first contract. They're going to want to buy it and test it and grow. But that said, these companies are coming here to sell. They're not coming here to develop products. So we got to focus on sales. So again, Japan's historically been seniority based, and that's not how the Western world works. But again, younger people, and for example, or women, they've been kind of locked out of the system. They want performance based. They don't want to wait till young guys don't want to wait till they're in their 40s to get a promotion to be sales manager. So that's another I guess advantage of a Western company is whoever's the best worker gets the promotion. Whoever's the best worker gets the job. It doesn't matter if you're 28 years old or you're 58 years old. Are you bringing in the numbers? So performance driven is what we're looking for. You mentioned about, harmony with in Japanese society and culture and business culture. One sad thing I see often is some of the Japanese companies, the sales managers are usually older guys, and some of them manage with maybe bullying or kind of, attack people. And it's not a fun environment, So when you can make a fun environment for the salespeople, then they're going to really want to come. But, related to that, when you're talking about culture, is the Japan education system creates a lot of farmers. and not many hunters. And that is a problem. So one problem I see Western companies get into is they meet someone who speaks English well and can talk a good game. Like, oh, I can communicate with this guy. Oh, he says he's done sales. And you hire him, and then the guy doesn't do anything because he doesn't have that hunter mentality. There's a lot of that where, hey, we hired this great guy, and then 3 months later is, why isn't he doing anything? Why doesn't he take our advice? Why does he have all these excuses? So it's the amount of A-level people that, speak English, understand the technology, understand sales, and then are aggressive and hunters. It's really, really few.
Yeah, it's very minuscule, right? So typically when a candidate walks into an interview with you or your team, what would they notice that's quite different from your process? And they would think, this is different. It feels different.
So I guess I ask a lot of questions about, I want to know what their hobbies are. When you're not working, what are you interested in? And if the guy's really unique, it's really interesting. I interviewed one lady. She says, I love baseball. I visited every Major League Baseball stadium in North America. It's like, wow, tell me about that. Sometimes it can go the other way where if you meet a guy and he's like, I play golf. I play the golf for 25 years, and that's what I do. That doesn't show me a lot of creativity or, it's just kind of following, kind of what society says. One guy that turned out great, he was a rice farmer. He said, I bought a rice farm in Yamanashi. I go there on the weekend. I plant rice. I love being out in nature. I'm like, wow, that's really interesting, Other ones, I want to know what their dream is. So what is your dream? And I open it up, not just for work, but what is your dream in life? What do you want to do? And so, those sort of questions. But also, I think another key thing in the interview process, not just the first 30 minutes, but what I like to do is take some of these guys out with the Japan team. So it's like you interview them and they're like, well, I don't know. I really like my job. My company loves me. It's like, why don't you come out to dinner with one or two of the sales guys? We hired this guy, Tanaka-san, 3 months ago. He can tell you about his first 3 months in the company and tell you what it's like to work here, and just casual, it's not an interview. Just go out. And they'll say, okay, yeah, we'll go out. And so get to know them as people and get to be their friends. One guy I did this with that we ended up hiring, I said, let's go out to eat with, one of the key guys in the company. And I took him to a Chicago pizza restaurant and we hired him. And I didn't realize this till like months later. He said, like, wow, that changed my mindset because he was so used to going to like a high-end izakaya where you sit down and, and he's just like, man, you took me to Chicago pizza restaurant and we ordered a bunch of Chicago pizza and craft beer. And it just was like a curveball for him. He didn't expect it, and he liked it, and he liked the pizza, and he saw that, I don't know if we're casual, I guess more fun. So those are some of the things that the interview process that's kind of worked for us.
It's definitely a different experience from a candidate perspective because typically in Japanese, you bring in the paper, you sit down, have a bunch of questions, very straight jacket. And then, you do a few rounds of those before you know whether you got the job or not, right? So it seems like what you're explaining to me is a system, a recruitment system. And, I want to dig a little bit more deeper on this. Most country managers treat hiring like a fire drill. Oh my God, somebody left. Panic sets in, right? Scramble. We need to fill that seat, put somebody in the seat quite quickly, right? How have you approached it? Like you mentioned, you do things differently as a system. So and create repeatable recruitment engine. What does that look like in practice?
Right. So I'm always recruiting and I'm always meeting people before the job opens up. And I don't know why this happens with Japanese employees in my company, but so I'll be like, hey, I want you to introduce me to this guy because he looks like a great sales guy. I want to talk to him for a role. And then our employees say, oh, do we have a job rec open? Well, no, not yet. Well, I'm not going to introduce him until we get the job rec open. But, it's like, well, no, we know we're going to be hiring 2 salespeople early next year. So what happens is when the job rec opens, I have people ready to go. And so many times in Japan, they don't want to introduce their friend or colleague until the role opens. But I think, one thing I've always done is always be recruiting, always try to, when I meet someone good, I always, remember who they are. And especially for like channel, when it comes to, channel sales. I mean, these guys, they're so rare in Japan to find a good channel guy. So I keep them in mind. I've had a lot of luck. One, like I said, I get prepared, but I've had a lot of luck. When the job rec opens, I've been able to fill them. And people at headquarters take it for granted. They don't understand how big that is to be able to hire someone quickly. So I've run into problems where I've had a couple of good A-level sales guys lined up, and boom, we hire them. And then the people from headquarters come over. They don't understand Japan. They think that's the average. Like, oh, you hired these sales guys. Well, hire a couple more just like them. It's like, well, these guys are really special. I don't know if you realize their English is good. They're aggressive. They know the technology. And so that just becomes the baseline for them. And, recently I've had that happen where, I hired a couple of really good sales guys, and then I wanted to hire a more junior person. And they're like, this person's junior. They're a baby. Get me some, it's like, no, this person's really good. They're young, but they speak English. They're ready to go. So, it's, always be recruiting, always be thinking of the roles. It's a question of quality over quantity. We don't need to hire 50 salespeople. We need to hire the one or two really good guys that are going to matter. So I keep my eyes open for them and keep them coming up.
Yeah, you've done really well to unlock that referral, right? Referrals, as you said before, are a really good source of talent, right? What have you done that gets people to actually refer you to, connections or?
Right. So I think a lot of companies know this, and I think it's really true in Japan, is internal referrals are the best. And then if you know someone who's worked with that person, because if no one's worked with them, it's kind of a risk. You don't know until they get in the seat if, sometimes if they're going to be normal or they're going to be a troublemaker. So if you can get the employees in your company to refer their good people, and this conversation happens 99% of the time. We'll hire someone new, or I'll join a company and I'll say to the staff, do you know anyone good for sales? And they'll be, no, we don't know anyone. And so one of the things I've done, if I'm comfortable with that person and they know me, is kind of, get a screen, go online with them and start looking through their LinkedIn. And always it happens where we'll get to page 2 and they're like, oh, this guy, he's a great sales guy. He's really angry at his company right now. He's super, oh yeah, well, can you introduce him? Oh yeah, I'll make an introduction. Then you go through, oh, this guy's great at customer success. Oh yeah, he's really good. I don't know if he's, and so nobody wants to make a introduction, but then, they don't think they know anyone. But then when you start looking through their LinkedIn, again, you just got to make sure they're comfortable with it, because you're kind of looking at, it's a public thing, LinkedIn, but you're looking at their personal information. And so that's one thing. The other one is what's funny is this, and again, this has happened at every Western company, where they pay a bonus if you introduce someone who gets hired. And what happens is Japan, a bonus becomes double, because they're like, every market we pay, $2,500 if you make a referral. But Japan, we really need people, so we're going to pay $5,000. And HR comes in, they make an announcement, and then a month later, why isn't anyone recommending anyone? So, well, again, it's not about the money for Japanese people. The worst thing that they can have happen is they introduce their friend goes into the process and gets rejected. That could hurt their friendship. And the plus of getting $5,000 is too much of a risk to introducing someone who doesn't make it through the process and could hurt their friendship. So that bonus, it's really often it doesn't work here, and it always just kind of confuses people overseas as to why the Japanese aren't interested in $5,000, especially at the exchange rate nowadays. So
yeah, I can see that. And I think, you've done well to kind of unlock this referral process, just your personality, your positivity, or your fun, so they know they can trust you, right? You build that trust, that rapport, like you said, before you actually get them to say, I know somebody, or here's somebody that I'm willing to introduce. So well done on you. And you've done a lot of experimentation with employer branding as well, right? We've done videos for your company in the past. You do videos, you've done events, you publish new hire interviews. What's actually worked in all of that? I'm sure you've got to do all of that, but what is the one thing that really kind of, works for you that you've seen?
Sure. So I think every company and every situation is different. So sometimes, you're just looking to hire one or two people, then you're probably not going to have a big, hiring event where you invite tons of people. And but then again, when we worked with your company years ago, I mean, we were told we had to hire like 20 people, 30 people in a short period of time. So we did like these hiring events where we would have people get, introduced. We'd try to get 70 or 80 people and have different people in the company introduce ourselves and why is it fun? And then we do the speed interview where you interview, I guess, 10 minutes, like 5 different people, and they go around. And then at the end, we would rack it up. It's a lot of work. We did hire some good people through it. But also, just the individual videos are good, and articles. I think the articles are great. And so what I would do is when we would hire a good young salesperson and they had success, interview them and put it on our website. And again, when I'd reach out to people and say, I'd like to have a casual chat with you, about maybe joining our company. So I'm not interested. Well, let me send you this link. There's a guy in our company. He's the same age as you. Here's an interview. He talks about his first 6 months, what he's learned. Send them the link, and then they can, and then follow up with them and say, well, why don't you come out and have dinner with them? So try to build that relationship. So I think there's just not one strategy that works. It just kind of makes sense what you're looking for. Are you looking for hiring a lot of people, or just hiring a few? But all those, you got to think outside the box. That's the key in Japan, is really, it's thinking outside the box. So.
Yeah. So having hired, internally for the last 30 plus years, and now you're advising companies across APAC on executive search, right? I'm curious, how does a problem look different from the other side of the table?
Well, the recruiting industry's changed a lot. It's always changing. When I go back 20 years and 15 years and 10 years and 5 years, it's totally different every time. And again, it's really changing right now. And what I've seen is the large companies are not hiring. And so if you look at like a Google or AWS or some of these companies, they are not downsizing, but when people leave, they're not refilling the roles, and they're trying to use AI to fill those roles. So they also have this brand recognition where people will send their resume. They're like, oh, it's Google. I'd love to work at Google. And they have a free restaurant for breakfast and lunch and this and that. So, but the small companies need people, and the startups are really hungry for people. And that's kind of where the market's moved to. I guess another thing with the large companies, they've kind of moved to in-house recruiters. But Japan, it's still unique in the world, and this shows how hard it is to hire. From what I understand, the fees that recruiters get in the U.S. now, 10, 15%, in other markets, Japan's still 30, 35%. Companies have to pay a lot, and they're shocked when they hear that, But it's just, at times you need a recruiter to get the right person. And again, if you make a bad hire in Japan, you get put in the penalty box, because Japanese labor law is on the side of the worker. And in America, I mean, Europe's different, but in America, you can just fire people. I mean, you're gone, you're out of here, and just get out. But in Japan, you have to kind of entice them to leave, or, and show that in good faith that you're, trying to coach the guy. And so you got to be really careful when hiring people. I think one of the things I've seen that's been a problem for Western companies is they tend to hire the person who speaks English best. And I had a boss, and this was tough, where he ran APAC, and every salesperson had to go through his final interview. And every time the Japanese candidates who spoke English well passed. Every time we had a candidate who didn't speak English so well, they failed. And I'd explain to him, I'd say, look, now this candidate, the English is mid-level, but we're fine with that. And the guy's mid-level, but he's a really good sales guy. And then he would get rejected. Because, right away they just think, and so I sat in on one of the calls, and I could just see the miscommunication going on the call. And so I'd keep interrupting him. Like, the candidate didn't understand your question. And then after the call, you're never getting on a call with me again. You kept interrupting me. It's like, well, because your whole interview was miscommunication, So it's kind of a tricky thing where a lot of times the Western companies will just, whoever speaks English best, and that might not be the best person for the role, and that might not be a hunter type personality. And there's a lot of people that speak English that aren't hunters. So it's just really a tricky market.
That's such a shame, isn't it? Because, in Japan, we know all business is done in Japanese. So as much as you need to speak English to probably report or have some communication with HQ, if you've got a manager, general manager that you're reporting to and handles everything in Japanese, do you really still need that, fluent English level? Which is really strange, which is why I want to talk a little bit more about the perfect candidate brief. Doesn't exist, right? So what's a realistic hiring brief for Japan, and what's the biggest mistake foreign companies still make when they engage with executive search firms?
Right. So, I think, you said the complete package. There are a few guys, there's very, very few guys who are the complete package. Now, I remember there was a guy, Nagasaki-san, who built AWS, and now he's at OpenAI. I mean, this guy, he's super solid. I worked with a very talented guy at Zscaler who's still there, Kaneda-san. He's got a lot of skills. But basically, it's hard to find people that have the whole package. So you got to know what's important. And experience can sometimes vary. A lot of times if you're an IT company, you need people with experience that know how to do. You don't have time to train, and you have a small office. So you got to find the people that have that experience. Now, once you hire enough people, let's say you have 4 or 5 experienced salespeople, then you can look at bringing in someone who speaks English real well, but maybe they're less experienced. So that balance is really important because, again, like you said, not everyone, you're not going to find that many people that have every single skill where, they're Japanese and they're aggressive and they have all these ties in Japan, but they speak English and they can, present in English and drive things. So it's that overall team balance. And do you have a lot of old people? Then you might want to hire some younger people that, have potential that can be mentored. Do you have a lot of young people? Well, you're going to have to hire people with experience to mentor them. So looking at the overall team balance is real important. For smaller operations, English is like mandatory. I mean, if you have a company under 10 people, they're going to have to speak English. So if you have a sales guy and the office is little and he needs a special discount, he's going to have to write emails back to the headquarters, to the deal desk in English to get that. If you have a sales engineer and the customer has a problem and you're in a small company, that sales engineer needs to be able to write that problem up in English and send it back to the technical team to get the answers. So for smaller operations, English is for the most part mandatory. But again, I think finding people I like to find smart people. I've hired a lot of people that didn't do the job. And I really, get bothered when companies say like, oh, we can't hire this guy for channel because he's never been a channel guy. Well, no, he can do the channel role. I know he can do it. So I found people, that haven't done a role, but I know they can do the role and actually get them trained and get them in there. So there has to be a lot of flexibility, and kind of that team balance is really important.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. Hiring A players is one thing, but keeping them, retaining them is another thing, right? And you've talked about building one-on-one relationships, taking time to understand what drives each person. But you're running a sales organization which has, hard quarterly sales targets, and you got to drive that. Where do you get the time from, and how do you balance that relationship and, retaining, quality talent, but at the same time, pushing them to achieve targets?
Right. So you really have to get to know each person individually and what motivates them. And everybody's different. And especially in Japan, and a lot of that, and Japanese people won't tell you, you ask them a question, what motivates you? They're not just going to come right out and say it. So you got to get to know them. And then again, I'll talk to a lot of the other staff, like, how's Tanaka-san doing? Is he doing good? And then you find out, well, his kid, they're trying to get him into the school and they have a lot of interviews. Okay, well, maybe he needs some more flexibility in the morning to do something, try to find out what they need. And like I said, the one guy, bringing food home to his wife was like, that was good, And so sometimes in the interview process, I've had to take guys' wives out for dinner. I had to go out for a brunch with my wife and a guy and his wife, and his wife talked to my wife about working for foreign companies, and at the end he said, "Great, I'm going to join." So yeah, it's happened where it's like you'll meet a guy who's like, "I want to join a company. I want to join your company, but my wife or my parents don't want me to join." It's like, all right, well, let's go out to dinner with your wife. Let's talk about it. You know what? If your husband stays at Hitachi, he's going to be a 52-year-old guy making 9 million yen a year with no skills, and no one's going to want to hire him. If he joins our company, within a year, he's going to have recruiters calling him for jobs. And let's say our company goes bankrupt. He's going to have companies calling him up for jobs 25, 30 million yen. There's more job security to join a hot IT company and develop your skills. The risk is not developing your skills. So that's one of the things. And then I think a key is, I like Phil Jackson. He was the coach of Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. And I heard one analyst say, he was the greatest coach of all time because both Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant say he just wasn't a good coach, but he taught me what it was like to be a man. He taught me, I grew a lot under him. So those are the kind of things, when you get young guys in and you mentor them. A lot of the people that have worked for me have gone on to be country managers, and I'll sit down with them earlier in their career and say, if you want to be a country manager, these are the things you need to develop now. And I can come at it from a different perspective than one of their Japanese managers. And I can explain, this is what headquarters is expecting. This is what Silicon Valley companies are expecting. And so, for example, one key thing is I had one really smart young Japanese guy who kept coming up to me. "What do I do here? What do I do there?" I said, "Look, you know what? You're going to have to answer all these questions. You want to be a country manager? You can never be a country manager if you can't decide everything, because there's nowhere to escalate up. You have to have the answer for every question. This customer's angry. Okay, we're going to do ABC. This feature is needed in Japan, but our company doesn't want to put it in the product, but it's going to affect our sales. What do you do? Okay, we're going to do plan ABC." So it's teaching the people how to grow, how to what they need for their next step. And then I think everyone that works with me comes away understanding the power of a positive mindset and how that affects not only them but the whole office. And so I'd have to say, if there's one superpower I have, that's my positive attitude, and always, and that gets infectious around the office. And once the office is positive and fun, then, that's when the miracles happen and you can really have those breakout years and overachieve on your targets.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. And so you said, in your experience, what's the most common mistake foreign leaders make in their first year in Japan that cost them, great people?
Yeah, I think, there was, I guess it was Andy Grove of Intel wrote the book, Only the Paranoid Survive. So not understanding your staff and then having them walk out the door. So people are like, "I didn't know this guy was unhappy. He left. I wish he would have told me," So I'm always paranoid about, just trying to understand everything going on, because there's just a lot going on in Japan where people don't tell you. So you got to stay close to your staff. So that turnover, there's a lot of, because everyone's coming after your guy. It's shocking when I, talking to some of the people I've worked with, and you look at their LinkedIn, and every day recruiters are pinging them for jobs because there's so few people. So they're getting contacted every day. So if they're not happy, then, they're going to leave. And one unfortunate thing, in this world we live in, there's a lot of, I guess siloed reporting where, marketing reports to someone in Australia and channel reports to someone at headquarters. And so sometimes I can't control those relationships. And so the manager is overseas and maybe they don't understand Japan and they're not tight enough with their person. And they're, and then we lose people. And, so that can be tricky. So it's just a very tricky market. I think everyone, everyone knows the power of corporate Japan. We can sit here and probably you and I name 100 companies in Japan, right, in 10 minutes. And even anyone overseas, they can, Toyota and Nintendo and Sumitomo and the names come out. So there's all these big companies to sell to here, not just for IT, but, medical devices, pharmaceuticals. But it's tricky. It's very, very tricky. And you get one thing wrong and you lose your best guy, or you hire the wrong country manager, and then the guy's causing trouble, and you got to get a lawyer, and he has a lawyer, and so it's just it's a huge opportunity, but it's also a huge risk, and so that's, I guess, one thing that foreign companies need to really understand is just how tricky it is, and how big the opportunity is.
Yeah. Before you wrap up, I want to talk a little bit about your new book, Gaishike de Katsu. So you're flipping the script. You're helping Japanese professionals to understand how to work at foreign companies. And in your experience and what you've observed, what do Japanese candidates get wrong or misunderstand about how to work at foreign companies, or how foreign companies evaluate them?
Right. So the reason I wrote the book was I would see people move from a Japanese company into a foreign company and then fail because the speed, the culture, everything was different. And so, and that's one thing I've worked on for decades, basically, and learned. So I thought I want to write this into a book. And so just a couple things. One is, for Japanese people, it's like, you want to work at a foreign company, you can make 3 times more money, but if you don't produce, they might fire you. That's not for everybody. But again, if they fire you, maybe you get the skill set to go to another job where you make even more money. Sometimes you got to learn. But I think one thing, Japanese, sometimes people just say, oh, foreign company. There's a huge difference between joining AWS Japan with, 4,000 employees and joining, Amazon Japan, or joining a startup with 1 employee or 2 employees. It's very different. So they got to think about, what type of company suits me? Am I more the startup guy? Do I want the big company? I mean, Amazon, if you're talking about job stability, I'd say, Amazon's more stable than a company like NEC or Nissan, which have both kind of, been on the verge of bankruptcy at times in the past. So then I think another thing is Japanese people managing their career. I think globally, most people don't manage their careers very well, but I think especially Japanese people. I think one thing is their whole lives have been decided, like you study hard to get into this cram school, to get into this high school, and then because you got in that high school, you get into this college, and then because you're in that college, you do the test, and you get into a big company, and then you stay in that company. And so things have kind of been decided. And for example, here's one pitfall I see is where Japanese guy will be in a company for 10 years and a recruiter calls him up and says, hey, I got a job double the salary. And he interviews like, wow, I'm going to take it. And then he takes it. But what he doesn't realize is he could have got triple the salary. And so when you have someone interested in you and you have a company interested in you, take the time to look around the market and see what's out there. There might be a much better opportunity out there. And so then, they got to open their eyes and understand the market, not just jump at the first opportunity. Another thing that they need to get right is sometimes you got to be pushy, and you got to be proactive. And, there's a story of this woman who went to work for a French, I guess, makeup company, cosmetics company, and they were going to do a marketing campaign and they were going to copy it off the one they used in France. And this woman joined the company and she saw everything wasn't going to work, but she didn't say anyone because she didn't want to bother anyone. So she didn't say anything, and they launched the whole thing and it fails. And then she said, oh, I knew it was going to fail. I was like, well, why didn't you tell us? Well, I didn't want to bother you. It's like, well, be proactive and tell us. So, and then the last thing I think advice I'd give Japanese, and there's a lot more advice in my book, but in the interview process, don't be shy. Talk about your skills, your achievements. And I've seen this happen so many times where, if you're interviewing an American guy, he's going to brag and he's going to be, were you good? Oh, I was number one. I was president. Oh, I'm so good at this or that, And you ask a Japanese guy, are you really good at this? Oh, no, I'm not really that good. No, and they're going to be humble. It's like, you don't see Shohei Ohtani walking around. I'm number one. I can pitch. I can bat. I mean, he's a very humble guy. He's bowing. I watched him the other day. He's walking around the locker room, picking up garbage off the floor, So the Japanese staff, when they join a foreign company, if they see something, they got to be very direct. And even if they think it's rude or pushy, they've got to communicate that Western way. They got to learn that. In the interview process, don't be shy. You don't have to brag, but what have you done? Don't run away from it. Just stand there. So it can be very uncomfortable for Japanese people to give themselves compliments and talk about themselves in a positive light.
Yeah. Darren, I think it's fantastic that you've written a book to help Japanese to understand how to work and get hired and work in foreign companies. Is the book out already? When is it out? We'll put it in the show notes here.
No, not out yet. Well, I don't know when this podcast is going to air. I'm looking at this summer. The book's done. I mean, it's done. Okay. It's just I'm launching it on Amazon Kindle, and so that means I have to do the promotions, which means I have to prepare to get the promotions going. But sure. I'll tell you, it's really, I guess wearing my Western hat, it's a good book. And one of the reasons I can say it's good is I've had a lot of Japanese people read it, but also I dropped it into a lot of AI tools and said, give me a book review. What are the weak points? And I found all the weak points I could find and fixed them and really tightened the book up. And again, it's in Japanese. It's for Japanese workers. And then I guess I have to write the other side of the book, How Do Foreign Companies Succeed in Japan? That's probably coming soon. So
I can see that coming soon. I will definitely put the link to the book in the show notes once you have it out. And help you to get the word out on that. To quickly wrap up, I've got a few quick-fire questions for you, if that's okay.
Good.
What's the best interview question you've ever asked a candidate?
Well, I guess to repeat what I said is, what is your dream? Mm-hmm. And then I clarify it I say it can be a personal dream or your work dream. What is what are these guys thinking? What drives them? What you can learn a lot about a person, not just I hit 83% of my number last year, but 200% the year before. So I always like to find out about the person and what drives them. So what is your dream? Are they intuitive? Are they creative? Are they unique? Mm-hmm. What drives them? And I want to know that before we hire them.
Sure. And what's the one trait you never compromise when hiring a salesperson?
I would say they have to be cooperative. I don't want anyone fighting. You can have 10 A-level players and you bring one C-level player in that starts complaining about stuff, and suddenly the whole level of the company drops. So someone who is someone who's a team player and they're not a complainer and they have a positive attitude. I mean, I won't. If someone's a great sales guy but they fight with people, I'm not hiring them.
Good advice for sure. And what's the one thing you would like to fix about how foreign companies hire in Japan?
One thing, I guess, to just learn more about the market. Here's an example. And every small company I've worked for here, they don't have staff in Japan. So they're using their recruiters from overseas their in-house recruiters from overseas, and they don't understand Japan. And then they just make a ton of mistakes. And then it's like, why can't we hire in Japan? Well, you're using recruiters. So that's actually something that's going to go into my next book is, how foreign companies can hire and succeed and thrive in Japan. And again, they need to learn the market, I'd say. That's really the key thing is talk to me. That's what they should do, is listen to me. And that's what they should do.
Absolutely. Darren, thank you so much. I think there's a lot we've covered here today that will resonate with, foreign companies looking to enter or hire or grow in the market. And I really like that idea of you treating recruitment as something you build, not something you scramble to fix, right? Don't wait for a role to open up, especially if it feels important. and also your perspective of how Japanese candidates look at, the opportunities, and depending on whether they're looking at them through a local lens or a global lens really is important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening or watching the Asia AIM podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And I'd also love for you to leave us a review. Reviews make a huge difference in how other people find our podcasts. Until next time, I'm your host, Robert Eld, and I'll be back soon with more conversations on how to win in Asia's dynamic and diverse markets. Goodbye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Asia AIM podcast. If today's conversation sparked new ideas or insight, be sure to subscribe, rate, and share the show. For more resources, tips on doing business in Asia, or to book a meeting with our team, visit asiaimpodcast.com. Stay curious, stay connected, and we'll see you in the next episode of Asia AIM.